As I write this story, I can't believe that what happened to me actually happened. I mean, I know it did because I have the scars to prove it, but it's one of those stories that sounds crazy if you take it out of context. And I get even more upset thinking about how many people are going to read this story and think I made it up. You're not going to believe this, but it's true. So trust me, let me tell you the story of the ghost bear. The thing is, I live in New York City now, and I work a job that doesn't allow me to take vacations. So when I do get time off, I try to make the most of it. Last year, I spent a week traveling Europe, and this year, I wanted to spend my week somewhere quiet and calm. I live in such a busy, loud place that sometimes I feel like my senses are dulled from the chaos. So I decided to spend my week upstate in the Adirondacks. I found a cabin secluded deep within its own woods with a lake nearby, good fishing and no neighbors. It was perfect. I arrived early in the morning, so I put my things down, poured myself a cup of coffee, and headed out for some fishing. I figured I'd cast a line out into the lake and wait for a fish to bite while I enjoyed the serenity of nature. But to my dismay, I found out that the peace and quiet was exactly what was missing from my life. The moment I was away from the cabin, I felt relaxed for the first time in months. I spent the afternoon fishing, though I didn't catch anything. And when I returned to the cabin, I lit up a fire, grilled some chicken, and retired early to bed. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise and immediately regretted falling asleep so early the night before. I'd slept right through my alarm, and I had less than 24 hours left at the cabin. Not wanting to waste any time, I changed into some hiking clothes and set off into the woods behind the cabin. I walked for hours, following winding trails deeper and deeper into the wilderness. At first it was exciting. I was surrounded by trees as tall as skyscrapers, and I could hear birds chirping songs that had long been drowned out by the honking of cars. But as the morning sun grew hotter and I kept hearing nothing but crickets chirping, I started to get scared. I don't know if I should have turned back after a few hours, but I kept telling myself that I'd be fine. I had my phone, I had water, and as long as I kept moving, I wouldn't run out of daylight anytime soon. I kept walking until I suddenly realized that I hadn't seen a trail marker in quite some time. As the trees thinned, I was confronted by a clearing, and standing in the middle of it was an old moss-covered stone wall. It looked like the ruins of an old house, or maybe a barn stood against the backdrop of the forest. I felt like I was intruding on something sacred, and I should have turned back, but instead I approached the wall and walked along it. As I rounded the corner, I could see that the wall wasn't the only thing standing in the clearing. Standing in the middle of the clearing was a huge tree, easily 3 times wider than any tree I'd ever seen before, and hanging from one of its branches was a rough wooden sign. I stepped closer and turned the sign over in my hands. It was covered in moss, but I could still make out the writing, "Beware." At that moment, I heard a snap in the trees behind me. I spun around and scanned the tree line, but I couldn't see anything. Then I heard it again, the snap of a twig being broken. I started to panic, fear shooting through my veins like a jolt of electricity. Whatever was out there was big and moving fast. I ran toward the sound, tripping over roots and rocks, my eyes scanning frantically for the source of the noise. I burst into the thicket of trees and slammed face first into the trunk of a tree. Disoriented and scared, I scrambled to my feet and ran in the opposite direction. I didn't know where I was going. All I knew was that whatever was out there wanted me gone. Suddenly, I came across a narrow opening between 2 tall trees. I bolted toward it, squeezing through the opening and stumbling into a small clearing. I collapsed on the ground, catching my breath, tears streaming down my face. That's when I saw it. In the center of the clearing stood the same tree I'd seen in the distance, and hanging from its branches was the same sign, except now it looked different. Hanging beneath the words "Beware" were 2 more signs, each with a single word written on them: "Turn back." Now I was terrified. I didn't know why, but I knew I had to get away from that tree. I scrambled to my feet and ran in the direction I thought I'd come from, but I quickly realized that I was hopelessly lost. I ran blindly, tripping over tree roots and fallen logs, desperate to escape the clearing. But no matter how far I ran, the forest seemed endless, and I could feel the creature's presence watching me from the shadows. I knew I had to stop, but my legs wouldn't listen. Eventually, exhausted and terrified, I collapsed on the ground. That's when I heard it, a loud crashing sound in the trees, followed by heavy footsteps. Whatever was out there was close. I squeezed my eyes shut and huddled in a ball on the ground, waiting for whatever was out there to find me. But it never did. When I opened my eyes, I was alone. Shaking and confused, I got to my feet and started walking in a random direction, hoping to stumble upon the trail I had been on earlier. But after a while, I realized I was still lost. And as the sun began to set, panic surged through me. Then I saw it. In the distance, I saw a light flickering through the trees. Hope surged through me. I stumbled toward the light, my heart pounding in my chest, and when I finally reached the trail, I ran. I ran as fast as I could, my lungs burning, my legs screaming in protest, but I didn't care. I didn't stop running until I saw a car on the road. I flagged down the car and explained that I needed help. The driver was kind enough to take me back to the cabin. When I arrived, I burst through the door and immediately noticed that the lock on the front door was broken. Someone had been inside. But I was so relieved to be safe that I didn't think much of it. I called the police from my neighbor's phone and gave them a description of what had happened. But when I turned back to the cabin, I could see that someone had been there. The sliding glass door had been smashed in, and my things were scattered everywhere. The windows were also smashed and shards of glass crunched under my feet. I began to cry, overwhelmed with fear and exhaustion. But when the police arrived, their reaction shocked me. "You were lucky," said one of the officers, his face grim. "Lucky what?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "Lucky that thing didn't get you," he replied. "What thing?" I pressed, my heart pounding in my chest. The officer looked at me for a moment, then shook his head. "Never mind," he said, his voice low. "It's not important." He helped me gather my things and drove me to the nearest hotel. I never did find out what that thing was. The locals in the area all seemed to know except the police, and they wouldn't tell me what it was. I have since moved to a new apartment, and I'm trying to move on with my life. But every time I close my eyes, I see that clearing and feel the presence of the creature lurking in the woods. Now, I know that most of you won't believe this story, and that's okay. I didn't believe it myself until it happened to me. I've always been a rational person, but sometimes there are things in this world that we can't explain. And that's why I'm sharing these stories. Maybe by sharing my experience, I can help others who might be going through the same thing. Or maybe I can just remind people that sometimes the scariest things in life are the ones we can't explain. If you have your own story that you'd like to share, please do. Who knows? Maybe together we can shed some light on the things that go bump in the night.